Today I am pleased to be sharing this space with my former coach, Sarah Robinson. She is the author of the book Fierce Loyalty, Unlocking the DNA of Wildly Successful Communities. And we're going to dig into her book, but also I wanted to extract some other juicy ideas from Sarah because she's a creative entrepreneur and that's what this space is all about. And she's reinvented herself at least a couple of times on her journey, at least. And you know, that journey has what's led her to this Amazon best-selling book. So Fierce Loyalty has been dubbed a practical how to put it to work now kind of a guide for understanding, building, and fostering a fiercely loyal community of clients, customers, and raving fans, which I think is something we can all use. We all know that building and sustaining a fiercely loyal community of clients, customers, and raving fans is critical for success in today's turbulent marketplace, and organizations and both corporate and nonprofit are looking for this kind of information, and the ones that are thriving have discovered what Sarah calls the underlying DNA that's shared by all wildly successful communities. So Fierce Loyalty unlocks that secret DNA and lays out a very clear, very practical model that any organization of any size can follow. Sarah's book actually helps you break down the process and then gives you clear, specific steps for creating and maintaining a fiercely loyal and wildly successful community. So I know you guys are thrilled to be hearing about that from the author's lips today. But for those of you who aren't familiar with Sarah, let me give you a little bit of her background. She is the president and CEO of Sarah Robinson Company. She's based in Birmingham, Alabama, and she advises her international clients on how to build a thriving, successful community, how to increase social media effectiveness, and how to develop a remarkable online and offline business presence. Now, I've watched Sarah from the wings for a while. I also worked with her a bit about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I was one of her coaching clients, and in the process of unraveling all of those things in my own business, I got to see some of what Sarah does really well from kind of the sidelines, and I watched her build groups and do events, and just the throngs of people who come at her like, oh my God, we're not worthy. And at the same time she does that, she's like, yeah, okay, like, look, that is not who I am and that is not what I'm about. But she has crafted for herself a persona that really makes her endearing to the people that come into her community. She uses the word tribe, and she's said repeatedly she used the word tribe before Seth Godin did, so you got to give Sarah props on that one. So without any more babbling on my part, I want to welcome Sarah to the program. Sarah, welcome. It's great to have you.
Hi, everyone.
Now, before we dig into the nuts and the bolts of the book, I want to talk evolution because, like I said, I've been watching your rise for several years now. You've had at least several evolutions. I even learned about a few more. You were an actress. You were a Martha Beck trained life coach. You were a direct sales coach. You coached mompreneurs. But you hit your stride with a community that you nurtured at Escaping Mediocrity. Now, creative entrepreneurs often go through what Jonathan Fields has called the thrashing, this changing of channels or this reinvention, feeling like you're in the spot, and then when you get there going, yeah, gotta move on again. There's something just not quite there. Can you give us a ride in the Wayback Machine and let us capture a glimpse of what this evolution has been like for you?
Yeah, as best I can. I'm happy to. Like you said, I was a professionally trained actress. I worked in nonprofits, cut my teeth in fundraising, still very, very, as you'll see in my book, very near and dear to my heart. I've worked in the corporate space. And I took some time off when I had my first child, who is now 10. Say it with me, 10. 10. I took some time off because I just sort of wanted to marinate in just being a mom. And in the throes of that, my brother called me. I'd never heard of Martha Beck, and my brother called me and said, you've got to go to a workshop with Martha Beck. And I'm like, you never gush about anything. You're Mr., straight-laced, button-down, wear a tie to work every day. What are you talking about? And so he connected me with Martha, and I went to a workshop of hers, and I was very lucky because it was me in a room of 7 people and Martha. And over the course of that workshop, she said to me, Sarah, if you would like to be a life coach, you have all the makings for a good one. Well, this, I'm dating myself because this was so far back. I didn't know what a life coach was. I'd never heard of one because everybody and their brother hadn't yet hung out that shingle, right? So I was like, what is that? What is, I don't even know what that is. So she told me a little bit about it, and I went home and I thought about it for about 6 months. And I said, yeah, I think that would be really something really that I'd really love to do. So I spent all my time with Martha, and she trained me to be a Martha Beck life coach. And when I got out into the life coaching space, it became very apparent very quickly that not only did I have skills in the life coaching arena, I had skills in the business arena. And a very dear friend of mine was fairly high up in a very prominent direct selling company. Had my own direct selling businesses at different times, but I hadn't really forayed into the leadership because it just wasn't where I was in that time. And so she brought me along into that organization and into the leadership arena of that organization, and I started working with leaders there. And really that was my first business, and I think that's where you and I first sort of crossed each other's paths, was in that space. And then as that business grew, I realized other people were starting to seek me out from different companies, because at the time my coaching practice was specifically for leaders in that company, and other leaders in other companies were starting to seek me out, and I realized I needed to have a venue for them. And so that's when I started direct selling leaders, because then I could work with leaders from all different companies, and I did that for a while, and I ran both companies for a while, and then I realized that I couldn't run both companies very well because I don't split myself well. And so I sold my original company and focused on direct selling leaders, and then not very shortly, probably a year later, realized that people who are not direct sellers were starting to come into my space, and I needed to expand my space again. And that's when I started the first iteration of Escaping Mediocrity. Was actually called the Maverick Mom, and I thought I was going to be coaching mompreneurs because that seemed to be sort of the natural outgrowth of where I was with direct selling leaders, because I was working mostly with business moms. So I did that, and then I sold direct selling leaders, and I started the Maverick Mom. And about 3 months into the Maverick Mom, I realized that there were people coming to the Maverick Mom who weren't moms, and who weren't necessarily mompreneurs, and I needed to expand the space again. And I sort of toyed with what to do at that point, because I realized, looking backwards, that I had sort of left this trail behind me of brands, and what to do at this point. Do I start a whole new brand? Do I try to morph the brand that I currently have, the Maverick Mom? And so that's what I attempted to do first. I held on to the Maverick Mom name and the Maverick Mom URL and just changed the tagline. Maverick Mom, Escaping Mediocrity One Adventure at a Time, because I knew that would at least help expand the umbrella. But even after I did that, I realized I was still being put in the mompreneur space, and that's what people assumed the Maverick Mom was about. So then I had a really difficult decision to make, because I did the thing that everybody tells you not to do, right? Changed the URL to Escaping Mediocrity, picked up the blog, renamed it, had the same look, but I renamed it Escaping Mediocrity. I bit off that chunk, moved everything to a new URL, announced what Escaping Mediocrity was going to be about. Wasn't a huge departure from the Maverick Mom, but it was a significant departure from the Maverick Mom, because I wasn't going to be writing just about straight business tactics. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I knew I had 3 people who were going to read Escaping Mediocrity once I moved it and started writing about the things that I wanted to write about, and that I knew there was a hunger for, because I had done enough paying attention in the social media space to know that there were people who wanted to talk about what it was really like to run a business and to deal with the frustrations and the angst and the uncertainties of all of that and navigating all of that, all while they still wanted to talk about what it was going to take to be successful. And that was risky at the time because there weren't very many people talking about that. Everybody was still painting the glossy picture. Don't you want my life? Don't you want my house? Don't you want to live like me? Don't you want to be me? Well, come spend a gob of money and learn how to be me. That was pretty much what the space was at the time. And so it was a big risk for me to start talking about things like how much failing sucks. One of my favorite posts ever. It was a big risk for me to start doing that. But, as you know, there seemed to be quite a craving for that because people came. And I decided very early when I created that community in that space that I did not want to be the center of that space. I wanted the community to be at the center. I hold the space and then allow and encourage and entrust the conversation at that space to the people who come there. And so that's how Escaping Mediocrity came to be, and came to be, you know, the place for a certain group of people where they felt safe and comfortable to talk about the things they wanted to talk about. So that's how I got to Escaping Mediocrity.
And this is a fascinating conversation because a lot of people won't confess to that past life of, you know, I did this, and part of it was working and part of it wasn't, and so I shifted, and then I shifted again, and sometimes I shifted several times, like really fast, and a lot of people don't want to go down that road and acknowledge that I wasn't born perfectly, excellently wonderful at everything I do. There was an evolution to that. So thank you for sharing that. Also,
you know, I was born perfect. I was born perfect at what I do. Lisa, what are you saying? I'm so perfect, and that's the image that I convey. How perfect I am.
And for $45,000 a year, you two can be in my little club, and I'll teach you how to be exactly perfect like me, right?
Exactly perfect. No, it's more like 100,000.
Right.
Learn how to be perfect I am.
If you're perfect, you have to charge more. That's right. All right. So fierce loyalty. You've given us this background that paints very clearly a picture of how well you have been able to build a tribe pretty much anywhere you go. But even you didn't realize, I mean, from what I've read and from the conversations that we've had, that was not something that you realized right at first. That's part of, you know, the whole thrashing. Can you talk us through the development of the fierce loyalty concept and how it ultimately became the platform for this best-selling book?
Sure. As you know, I have two dear friends, Elizabeth Marshall and Janet Goldstein. Elizabeth has been after me to write a book for several years, and I was always like, well, I don't know what I'm going to write it about, you know? What would I write it about? And we sort of played around with a couple of ideas from time to time, but nothing really stuck. And I was fortunate enough to be the MC at their last live event, Book Breakthrough in New York. And I realized, as I also participated in that event, I realized it was time for me. I was either needed to write a book or I needed to, you know, fold it up and go serve coffee at Starbucks. I mean, it was really sort of that kind of decision point for me. And so I signed up for their mastermind program. And one of the very first things, I remember Janet Goldstein asking me to do this and me very distinctly rolling my eyes about it, let me be clear. She, which you've never seen me do, ever.
Never.
She said, okay, I want you to write out your entire life's resume. Not starting with when you were born, but all the significant things you've ever done in your life ever. Really? I have to do that? Haven't I already done that? What? Okay, fine. So I do it with my eyes rolling the whole time. And when it's time to have that conversation with Janet and Elizabeth, and we start walking through all the things I've ever done ever, Janet very quietly says, oh, you've been building communities your whole life. I'm like, I have? Oh, I guess I have. And what's sort of significant, what I've come to understand about that, is it's such a part of how I do business that it just never sort of occurred to me that it was anything particularly significant. Which, as you and I both know, that's sort of the thing that we do easiest is the thing that we usually teach best, and we don't realize is the thing, right? Because we think everybody knows it. It's so easy for us, we think everybody knows it.
Right.
And so she said, well, here, let's do this. Why don't you, she said, I think your book is going to have to do with community because I think that's what you have the most expertise in. And it's the thing, at the time, community was just starting to make that rumble, right? Now it's blaringly loud, the whole idea around community, but it was just starting to rumble a little bit. And she said, here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to read, research, find all the books, all the companies, all the communities out there that you think really have it going on. And I want you to also go back and look at all the communities you've ever built. And let's just see what common denominators there are. Okay. I was the geek in college that loved a good research paper and would bury myself in the library, you know, and sad when I finally had to actually put it together into something readable because I was still busy filling out my index cards. So that's what I did. I read a ton. I researched a ton. I asked people, you know, what do you think? Give me an example of the very best community you can think of. And most of the time, there were communities I'd never heard of. So I would go research them. And I started pulling them apart and looking, you know, making lists of qualities and things that I saw in these, you know, standout communities and in the communities I'd built. And I started cross-referencing and making lists and marking things out and consolidating. And I came up with a list of about, at the time, 14 things that were present across the board in these communities. And I was like, okay, so I have this list of qualities. Now what do I do with it? And we started messing around with, well, can you find a progression? Can you find a pattern in evolution or how these things, you know, sort of came together? And that's when I called on my absolutely the smartest friend I have, Les McEwen. Absolutely, hands down, the smartest man drawing breath right now. And said, okay, so I have these qualities and I'm just not sure where to go with them next. And we spent a day sort of hashing through what I'd learned, what I knew, what my list was, the examples that I had. And he helped me, because he thinks in Venn diagrams, he helped me draw out the model for fierce loyalty. And we consolidated. It was a list of 14 at the time, and we consolidated it down to 9. And also looked at what came before the 9 and what comes after the 9 to help flesh out that model of fierce loyalty. And then once I had that model very roughly drawn out, and I mean roughly in the literal sense because you've seen what I drew versus what Lori drew.
Oh, you're so
Clearly, drawing on a computer is not where I need to be spending my skill sets because it's not there.
Nice.
But I had it, and I had it roughly drawn out, and that's what I used as my book outline. Was once I had that model, I then broke it down and started talking about, well, what do people want to know about each of these pieces, and what can I convey about each of these pieces, and convey it in a way that will make it make sense. I mean, the biggest compliment, I got it yesterday, the biggest compliment I can get is you've taken something that could be so insanely complex and you've made it accessible and understandable and doable for people. Doable and easy, not the same thing. Let me be really, really clear.
Word.
Because if it were easy, everybody would have a fiercely loyal community. It's not easy, but it's doable. And that was my whole goal as I wrote the book.
Well, and I think, too, that one of the things that a lot of people, you know, they pick up a book like this, or they've got their head down thinking, I want a fiercely loyal community. I want to have, you know, I want to have the religious throngs that Apple has, and they don't realize is that takes time. You know, Apple didn't just put up a store yesterday and sell an iPhone and now the world is at their door. This was a progression. This was a timeline, even for them. So yes. I appreciate it's not always easy, but it's doable. And that's one of the things that I really liked about digging into your book. It's not a long book. There's not, all of this heavy theory that comes down from on high. There's great case studies. There's great illustrative points that back up everything that you've said in the book. And there's very practical how-tos at the end of the chapter. It's like, okay, this is what you need to do to tackle this piece. This is what you need to do to tackle this piece. And it's clear. It's not in a bunch of jargon that people have to try and figure out and translate before they can do the work. So that's really, I mean, I've told people, you're not going to spend your money any better if building community is what you want than to get this book. So let's dig into the book a little bit. You talk about the DNA. You say there's 5 building blocks, kind of like the strands of DNA. Can you talk to us about what those strands are?
Sure. And when I sit down with clients, when I do interviews like this, I like to talk about, this is what I do with my clients, because this is now what I do with my clients, and I will do it with you because I didn't know this. I didn't know I knew this. I didn't know I knew this. I had inklings of it. I didn't know I knew it.
Right.
So when I sit down with my clients, the first thing I say is, okay, why do you want a community? What do you want it to do for you? Because that will then dictate everything else. Everything else we talk about as we start digging through the model will be influenced by why you want a community.